There's something I've been thinking about lately. How we decide who matters. It happens so quickly, doesn't it? A glance at someone's clothes, the work they do, the way they carry themselves through a room. And in that single breath, we've already written their story, decided what they're worth, filed them away into some quiet corner of our attention where they won't trouble us. I wonder how many people I've done that to. How many times I've looked right through someone without ever really seeing them at all. This is a story about that. About the invisible people who hold the world together while the rest of us rush past, too busy to notice. And about one man who reminded me that dignity isn't something you earn with a title. It's something you carry in your hands, in the way you move through the world, in the small kindnesses you offer when no one is watching. Come sit with me for a while. The fire's warm, and I think you might need to hear this. I was 26 when I started working at Hartwell & Associates, fresh out of graduate school, hungry for something I couldn't quite name. Success, I suppose. Recognition. The feeling that I mattered in some way that could be measured and proven. The building was glass and steel, all sharp angles and polished surfaces. The kind of place where your footsteps echoed in a way that made you feel small. I remember walking through those doors on my first day, clutching my briefcase like a life raft, certain that everyone could see how terrified I was. The lobby was vast and cold, abstract art on the walls that I pretended to understand. A reception desk that seemed designed to intimidate rather than welcome. Marble floors so polished they reflected the fluorescent lights like still water. And there, in the corner near the elevators, an old man with a mop and bucket, working in slow, careful circles. I barely noticed him. Just a shape in my peripheral vision, part of the furniture of this new world I was so desperate to belong to. His name was Walter, but I wouldn't learn that for months. Those first weeks were a blur of meetings and memos, of learning the unwritten rules that governed everything, who to agree with, who to avoid, how to laugh at the right jokes and stay quiet during the wrong ones. I shared a small office with 3 other associates, all of us competing for the same handful of promotions, all of us pretending we were friends. The air smelled like printer ink and ambition. The coffee was always too strong and slightly burnt, but we drank it anyway because it kept us alert through the endless hours. The company was led by a man named Richard Crane. Everyone called him Mr. Crane, even the senior partners who'd known him for decades. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that seemed to bend the room around him. When he spoke, people leaned in. When he was silent, they held their breath. I admired him at first. There was something magnetic about his confidence, the way he moved through the world as if it had been built specifically for him. I wanted to be like that someday, certain, unshakable, the kind of person who never had to wonder if they belonged. But there was something else too, something harder to name, a coldness in the way he looked at people. Not cruelty exactly, more like they simply didn't register, as if most of the world existed at a frequency too low for him to hear. I told myself it was just the nature of leadership, that you couldn't run a company of 300 people and care about each one individually. That efficiency required a certain distance. I was young. I believed a lot of things that weren't true. Walter was always there, every morning when I arrived, every evening when I left. Pushing his cart through the hallways, emptying trash cans, wiping down surfaces that already looked clean, moving with a kind of quiet patience that seemed almost meditative. He was old, 70, maybe 75. His hair had gone white, and his hands were spotted with age. But there was a steadiness to him that I found oddly comforting. Like an old tree that had weathered so many storms, it had forgotten how to be afraid. I noticed small things about him, the way you notice details about the scenery you pass every day. The slight limp in his left leg, the way he hummed softly while he worked, melodies I didn't recognize, the care he took with everything he touched, as if even the most ordinary tasks deserved his full attention. His uniform was always clean and pressed, a simple gray that seemed to blend with the walls, but his shoes were well-worn leather, polished daily, the kind of shoes a man might have kept for 20 years because they fit just right. We nodded at each other sometimes, those small acknowledgments that pass between strangers who share a space. He had kind eyes, I noticed, the kind that crinkled at the corners, even when his mouth stayed still. But I never stopped to talk. I was always rushing somewhere, always convinced that whatever waited at my desk was more important than a conversation with the janitor. Funny, isn't it? How we measure importance by all the wrong things. The incident happened on a Thursday in late October. I remember because the leaves had just started to turn, and the morning light had that golden quality that makes everything feel briefly beautiful. There was a crispness in the air that morning, the kind that makes you feel awake and alive, and I remember thinking it was going to be a good day. We were in the large conference room on the 12th floor, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city, making everyone inside feel like they were floating above the ordinary world. Mr. Crane was presenting the quarterly numbers to the executive team, and a handful of us junior associates had been invited to observe. It was meant to be an honor, a sign, that we were being considered for advancement. I sat in the back, taking careful notes, trying to look alert and engaged. The room smelled of expensive coffee and leather chairs. The table was long and dark, polished to a mirror shine. Mr. Crane's voice filled the space with numbers and projections, charts sliding across the screen behind him in careful sequence. Halfway through the presentation, the door opened quietly. Walter came in with his cart, moving toward the corner where a small trash can needed emptying. He was trying to be invisible, the way he always was, slipping in and out of rooms like a shadow, like a ghost who meant no harm. But Mr. Crane stopped mid-sentence. The room went silent. "Excuse me," he said, and his voice had that sharp edge that made people sit up straighter. "What do you think you're doing?" Walter looked up, surprised. For a moment, his eyes met Mr. Crane's, and I saw something pass between them. Not fear exactly, something quieter. A kind of patient understanding. "I apologize, sir. I'll come back later." "Yes, you will." Mr. Crane's jaw tightened. "Or better yet, learn to read a schedule. This is an executive meeting. Do you understand what that means? Do you have any idea what we're discussing in here?" The room was frozen. I could feel the discomfort radiating from everyone, but no one spoke, no one moved. We were all too afraid of becoming the next target. Walter stood very still. His hands stayed on his cart, steady as ever, knuckles neither white nor trembling. "I understand, sir. I was told this room would be empty. The schedule must have been changed." "The schedule," Mr. Crane repeated, his voice dripping with something I didn't want to name. He looked around the room, inviting everyone to share in his amusement. "You're telling me you can read?" A few people laughed. Quiet and uncomfortable laughs, the kind that come from fear rather than amusement. The sound made something curdle in my stomach. Walter said nothing. He simply nodded once, turned his cart around, and left the room. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow seemed louder than any slam. Mr. Crane returned to his presentation as if nothing had happened. The numbers continued, the projections were discussed, and I sat there with my careful notes, feeling something shift inside me that I couldn't quite understand. After the meeting, I found myself wandering the hallways instead of returning to my desk. The afternoon light was slanting through the windows, turning everything amber and gold. I wasn't looking for anything exactly, just walking, trying to shake off the weight of what I'd witnessed. I found Walter in the break room on the 4th floor, sitting alone at a small table by the window. He had a cup of coffee in front of him, and he was staring out at the city with an expression I couldn't read. The room was empty except for him, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. I hesitated in the doorway. Then I walked in and sat down across from him. "I'm sorry," I said, "about what happened up there. It wasn't right." He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes searching my face. Then he smiled, just slightly. "That's kind of you to say. It was cruel. He shouldn't have spoken to you that way. Nobody should speak to anyone that way." Walter took a sip of his coffee. Steam rose from the cup, curling in the light. "I've been spoken to many ways, in many places. You learn that words only have the power you give them." I didn't know what to say to that. It seemed too wise, too patient, for someone who had just been humiliated in front of a room full of people. "How do you do it?" I asked. "How do you just let it go?" He set his cup down and turned to look out the window again. The city stretched out below us, all those lives moving and intersecting in the patterns we couldn't see. Cars flowing through streets like blood through veins. People walking, each one carrying their own invisible story. "When I was young," he said slowly, "I thought the world owed me something. I thought that if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, I would earn my place. That respect would come to me because I had proved myself worthy of it." He paused, and something passed across his face, a shadow of something old and far away. "But I learned that respect isn't something you earn from others. It's something you give to yourself. And once you have it there, truly have it, no one can take it away. Not with words, not with laughter, not with anything." I sat with that for a moment. The break room hummed quietly around us. Somewhere, the coffee machine gurgled inside. Outside, a bird landed on the windowsill, cocked its head at us, then flew away. "What did you do?" I asked. "Before this, I mean." He smiled again, that same slight smile. "Oh, many things. I've had many lives." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. We sat together in comfortable silence until I had to return to my desk. But something had changed. A door had opened somewhere inside me. just a crack, letting in light I hadn't known I was missing. Over the following months, I made a point of talking to Walter whenever I could. Brief conversations usually, a few minutes here and there, stolen between meetings and deadlines. But they became something I looked forward to, a respite from the relentless pressure of trying to be someone I wasn't sure I wanted to be. I learned to find him in his quiet places, the break room on the 4th floor, the stairwell on the 8th, where he sometimes sat during his lunch, eating a sandwich his late wife used to make for him, the recipe now his own to carry forward, the small garden courtyard on the ground floor, where he would stand among the potted plants, touching their leaves with gentle fingers. He told me about his wife, Eleanor, who had passed away 3 years before, about their 2 children, grown now, with families of their own, a daughter who lived in Seattle and taught kindergarten, a son in Chicago who ran a small bakery and sent Walter bread every month, wrapped in brown paper that always arrived smelling faintly of rosemary. He told me about his garden, where he grew tomatoes and peppers and herbs that he gave away to neighbors. He described the particular joy of watching something grow, of putting your hands in the dirt and feeling connected to something older than any of us. He made it sound sacred, that simple act of nurturing. He never complained, never spoke bitterly about his work or his circumstances. He seemed to have made peace with his life in a way that I found both baffling and beautiful. "Don't you ever wish things were different?" I asked him once. He thought about it. "I used to. When Eleanor was sick, I wished for many things. I wished I could take her pain away. I wished for more time. I wished I had said and done so many things differently." He looked at his hands, those weathered hands that had done so much work over so many years, hands that had built things and held things and let things go. But wishing is just another way of running from what is. And what is, well, it's the only thing we truly have, isn't it? This moment, this breath, this conversation with you, right here, right now. I didn't understand it then, not really, but I held on to his words like seeds, trusting that someday they might bloom into something I could use. There was one afternoon in particular that I carry with me still. I was having a terrible day. A project I'd worked on for months had been dismantled in a single meeting, my ideas dismissed by people who hadn't bothered to understand them. I was sitting in the stairwell, hiding from everyone, trying not to cry. Walter found me there. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down beside me on the cold concrete steps and waited. "They didn't even listen," I finally said. "They didn't care. None of it mattered." He nodded slowly. "That's a hard feeling." "I don't know why I'm here," I admitted. "I don't know if I belong in this world. Everything feels wrong." He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "When I was about your age, I felt the same way. I was working so hard to prove myself, to climb whatever ladder I thought I was supposed to climb. And one day, I realized I didn't even know whose ladder it was. Someone had told me it was important, and I had believed them without ever asking why." I looked at him. "What did you do?" "I kept climbing," he said, "for a while, because I didn't know what else to do. But eventually I learned to ask different questions. Not, how do I get to the top? But what do I actually want? Not, how do I make them respect me? But, what would it mean to respect myself?" He smiled. The answers took a long time to come. But they did come. They always do, if you're patient enough to wait for them. We sat there together as the afternoon light faded, and somehow, the weight I'd been carrying felt a little lighter. The truth about Walter came out in December, during the company's annual holiday gala. It was a lavish affair, held in the grand ballroom of a hotel downtown. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across the ceiling like captured stars. White tablecloths gleamed beneath centerpieces of winter roses. A string quartet played in the corner, their music weaving through the hum of conversation. Everyone dressed in their finest, laughing and networking, and pretending to enjoy conversations they would forget by morning. I was standing near the bar, nursing a glass of wine I didn't really want, when I heard the commotion. A cluster of people near the entrance, voices raised in surprise and excitement. I made my way over, curious. And there was Walter, but not the Walter I knew. He was wearing a tailored suit that fit him perfectly, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe. His white hair was neatly combed, and beside him stood a woman I recognized from the business pages, Margaret Chen, the CEO of Chen Industries, one of the largest technology firms in the country. She was holding his arm, smiling up at him with obvious affection. "Uncle Walter," she was saying, "I can't believe you've been working here all this time and never told me." The room had gone quiet. People were staring. I saw Mr. Crane across the ballroom, his face pale, his drink frozen halfway to his lips. Someone near me whispered the explanation, and it spread through the crowd like ripples in still water. Walter Chen, the founder of Chen Industries, one of the wealthiest men in the country. He had built the company from nothing, grown it into an empire that employed over 50,000 people worldwide, and then walked away from it all 30 years ago, handed the reins to his niece and simply disappeared. Or rather, he had become invisible, by choice. Later, I found him standing alone on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. The night was cold, and our breath made small clouds that vanished into the darkness. The noise of the party drifted out through the doors behind us, muffled and distant, belonging to some other world. "You knew all along," I finally said. "When Mr. Crane said those things to you, when everyone laughed, you knew who you were." He nodded slowly. "I knew who I had been, but that wasn't the point." "Then what was?" He turned to face me, and his eyes were gentle, patient, as if he had been waiting for this question for a very long time. "When I left the company," he said, "I thought I was free. I had more money than I could ever spend. I could do anything, go anywhere. But I found that I was empty, that all those years of building and achieving had left me hollow. I didn't know who I was when I wasn't the man in charge." He looked back out at the lights. They sparkled against the dark sky, each one a window into someone else's story. "So, I went searching. I tried many things, travel, philanthropy, hobbies I'd never had time for. But nothing filled the emptiness until Eleanor suggested that I try something radical, that I become, for a time, the kind of person I had spent my whole life not seeing." A small smile crossed his face, tender with memory. "It was hard at first. The invisibility, the way people looked through me, the assumptions they made about my intelligence, my worth, my value as a human being. But somewhere in that difficulty, I found something I had lost: humility, connection, the understanding that every person, no matter their title or their bank account, is fighting their own quiet battles." He paused, and the night seemed to hold its breath around us. "And I found that I could still be useful, that a clean floor matters, that an empty trash can matters, that a smile offered to someone rushing past, even when they don't return it, matters. The small things, the invisible things, they hold the world together." I felt tears prick at my eyes, though I couldn't have explained exactly why. "But why stay?" I asked. "After Eleanor passed, after everything, why keep coming here every day to do this work?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because it reminds me who I want to be," he said softly. "Not the man with power, not the man on the magazine covers, but the man who can find dignity in any circumstance, who can offer kindness without expecting anything in return, who can look at someone and see not their position, but their humanity." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "That man in the conference room, the one who mocked me, he wasn't evil. He was afraid that his power might not be real if he couldn't wield it over someone, afraid that his worth might be measured by something other than how many people he could look down upon. His grip was warm and steady. Don't become him. That's all I ask. Don't let this world convince you that you have to shrink others to feel tall. The tallest people I've known are the ones who spend their lives lifting others up." The months that followed were strange and transformative. Mr. Crane resigned quietly, though the official story was that he had decided to pursue other opportunities. I never knew exactly what happened behind closed doors, but I heard whispers that Walter had refused to take any action against him, had simply asked to continue his work as before. And he did. He kept coming in every day, pushing his cart through the hallways, offering his quiet nods and gentle smiles. The only difference was that now everyone nodded back, everyone smiled in return. But Walter seemed to prefer the genuine connections to the newly attentive ones. He still sought out the quiet corners, still spent his lunch breaks in the stairwell or the courtyard, still treated everyone exactly the same, whether they wore suits or uniforms, whether they knew his story or not. I left the company 2 years later, started my own small firm, built on principles that would have seemed naive to my younger self, treating everyone with dignity, measuring success by something other than the numbers on a spreadsheet, creating a place where no one would ever be mocked for the work they did. Walter came to my opening. He brought tomatoes from his garden, bright red and heavy with summer. He was 80 by then, moving slower, but with the same quiet steadiness that had always defined him. "I'm proud of you," he said, and those 3 words meant more than any award or accolade I had ever received. Walter passed away last spring, peacefully, in his sleep, at the age of 83. His garden was in full bloom when it happened. The tomatoes were just starting to ripen, green giving way to gold, giving way to red. I spoke at his memorial, tried to find words for what he had given me, though I knew I would fall short. Some gifts are too large to hold in language. They can only be held in the way you live your life. The service was held in a small chapel, but hundreds of people came. Not the wealthy and powerful who had once sought his counsel, but the ordinary people whose lives he had touched in ordinary ways. Neighbors, colleagues. The woman from the grocery store who said he always asked about her grandchildren. The young man from the mailroom who said Walter had helped him apply for college. Each one had a story. Each one had been seen by him, truly seen, in a world that so often looks right through us. What I think about most when I remember him is not the revelation at the gala, not the power he had walked away from, or the wealth he had chosen to leave behind. I think about those mornings in the break room, the simple conversations, the way he listened without judgment, the patience in his eyes when I was young and foolish and so certain that the world owed me something. He taught me that true wealth has nothing to do with money, that true power has nothing to do with titles, that the measure of a person is not what they accumulate, but what they give away. And he taught me to see the invisible people, the ones who clean the floors and empty the trash cans and keep the lights on while the rest of us are too busy to notice. They are everywhere if you look, doing the work that holds the world together, offering their quiet dignity to anyone who has eyes to see it. The fire's burning low now. Outside, the wind is picking up, carrying the smell of coming rain. I've been thinking about those invisible threads that connect us, the small moments that change everything. A conversation in a break room, a nod exchanged in a hallway, the choice to see someone instead of looking through them. We never know who people really are, not from their clothes or their work or the way the world has sorted them into categories. We only know what they show us, and often, the ones who show the least are carrying the most. Walter showed me that dignity is a choice we make every day. Not something we earn or prove, but something we practice. In the way we treat the person who serves our coffee. In the patience we offer to someone who is struggling. In the refusal to diminish others in order to feel larger ourselves. Maybe that's the real measure of a life. Not the heights we climb, but the grace with which we treat those we meet along the way. I hope, when my time comes, that someone will remember me the way I remember him. Not for what I achieved, but for how I made them feel. Not for the power I held, but for the kindness I offered. The rain is starting now, soft at first, then steady, washing the world clean. I think I'll sit with it a while longer. There's something healing in the sound, something that reminds me of Walter and Eleanor and all the invisible saints who carry us when we don't even know we're being held. They're all around us, you know. We just have to learn to see.